Heidi Stiller is the South Regional Director for NOAA's National Ocean Service Office for Coastal Management. Stiller serves as a focal point for senior-level coastal partner interaction at the regional, state, and local level, from North Carolina down to Texas. She helps to implement national and regional coastal and ocean programs and connects on-the-ground practitioners with NOAA products and services. She has experience with post-disaster recovery and has served as an author on the coastal chapter of the 4th National Climate Assessment. Thank you so much for joining us today, Heidi.
Thanks, Lauren. Just a quick audio check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. I'd like to welcome and thank everyone who has joined us today. A community of practice is all about pursuing solutions around shared interests. And it is both heartening and sobering how many of you want to engage on the topic of coastal inundation. The fact that we had to expand this webinar to accommodate double the numbers that we originally envisioned is a testament to both how serious our challenges are around coastal inundation, as well as to how many people want to tackle these challenges and help communities thrive. While we were blown away by the level of interest, we recognize that individuals may want different levels of engagement, and we'll be asking you a bit about that today. Some of you may want to just track new research and tools. Others may want to share best practices for community engagement, and then others may want to actually co-develop new communication pieces. Many of you expressed interest in networking, and we'll be trying to facilitate that. And I want to mention that we know some of you are also part of existing resilience networks at local, state, and regional levels. And we really hope that what's learned in this topically focused community of practice can be taken back to support those networks. So my job today is to say a few introductory words about why we're launching this community of practice, why it's national, and why NOAA sees so much value in this. I've also got some thank yous for the team that's making it happen. So the original idea of a coastal inundation community of practice and the information in the previous report was really slow to reach practitioners, and those working with communities wondered how that technical content could be applied to their work on the ground. So as the 2022 technical report was coming together, a group of individuals that I will call boundary spanners, so folks from across the country that work to translate the science and modeling to help those developing resilience plans and projects actually apply the science, a group of those folks came together to write an application guide. That group works really closely with the tech report authors to ensure the content was accurate. And then we had local level practitioners from different regions review the guide to make sure it was useful. This experience really illustrated the value of this type of collaboration and the need for it. It showed the value of having perspectives and experiences from all around our diverse coastal regions. Issues and terminology vary, and there's much to be learned by sharing how different places are tackling inundation challenges, what works, what doesn't work in different contexts and different situations. So that was the inspiration for a national coastal inundation community of practice. Inspiration, however, needs to be paired with resources to make it happen. And it's thanks to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that is enabling us to turn that inspiration into reality. Congress recognized the growing challenges related to flooding in our country and gave NOAA funding and a charge to focus on flood mapping and modeling. NOAA will use a lot of those funds to do the technical work, to improve the models, to generate more accurate information, and to collaborate with our interagency partners who are also generating important science. But we recognize that the technical work needs to come alongside engaging with users of the information all along the way. And that's how we made the case for this community of practice. I do want to emphasize that informing NOAA's work is just one goal. Ultimately, a community practice is about that common pursuit of solutions around shared interests, and pursuing solutions to coastal inundation challenges is going to involve more than modeling and science translation. It also involves understanding the perspectives and histories of those impacted by flooding, exploring building standards, policy interventions, habitat restoration, and facilitating hard community conversations, to name a few. And that's why it's so exciting that so many of you have joined us today and signed up for the listserv. So now we know that there are many folks from all different parts of the country and all different sectors who care about understanding current and future inundation-related needs of our coastal communities and ecosystems. And it's inspiring to think about how we can leverage that collective expertise, lessons, and determination that you all bring to the challenges surrounding coastal inundation. And speaking of experience and determination, I want to close out by thanking those who have stepped up to help lead and guide this effort. Within NOAA, my office, the Office for Coastal Management, has partnered with the National Sea Grant Office. Together, we're engaging partner programs in every coastal state and territory, and many of you from those programs have tuned in today. NOAA is also extremely grateful that the American Society of Adaptation Professionals has joined us in the community of practice effort. ASAP reaches practitioners across the country who bring a wealth of expertise, and the organization's focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in adaptation will bring essential perspectives to this conversation. Finally, I really want to thank the implementation team. You'll be introduced to them shortly. These folks have agreed to help guide this whole effort. We knew that we needed people in the trenches doing the work on the ground to keep it real, to ask tough questions about what will really make a difference, and also to bring inspiration and laughter, because those are critical parts of community building as well. With that, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll turn it back over to Lauren.
Thank you, Heidi, for kicking off this meeting and for providing the background context for this community of practice. Looking ahead to the rest of this presentation, we will next provide an introduction to the community of practice, including its development to date. Then we'll have the opportunity for you to meet a few other practitioners in the room during networking breakout groups. From there, we'll cover expressed needs and interest before listening to a panel discussion where panelists will share coastal inundation challenges they're facing in the field. Finally, we will end the call by discussing next steps and plans for future engagements. A copy of the agenda will be dropped in the chat box for your reference. I will now hand the presentation over to Kate McClure.
Thanks, Lauren, and thank you all again for joining us today. It's really great to see so many new and familiar faces on the call. So my name is Kate McClure. I'm with the National Sea Grant Office and the Maryland Sea Grant Extension Program. I'm going to be giving a brief overview of the community of practice, including its development to date and its currently envisioned mission and objectives. But before jumping into that, I want to acknowledge that the event today is mostly presentations, which is not what we initially envisioned or expect for future events. We structured it this way because there was such a high level of interest in attending, and we felt it was important for this first event to be as inclusive as possible by making sure it was open to as many people as it could be. So we're thrilled that so many of you are here today, but the large number of registrants meant this event couldn't incorporate quite as much interactive peer engagement as we anticipate for future events. However, we are still really interested in hearing from all of you today. We'll be using the Poll Everywhere platform to ask questions and get input from you during the meeting today. We also encourage you to use the chat box to ask any questions or share anything else that comes to mind. So as Heidi mentioned, this community of practice is being stood up collaboratively by NOAA's Office of Coastal Management, the National Sea Grant Office, and the American Society of Adaptation Professionals, or ASAP. And this effort was made possible through funding from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We have a team of individuals from those three organizations all working together to develop and facilitate this new community of practice. Members of this team bring expertise working with different parts of NOAA, working on the ground as practitioners addressing coastal flooding, and facilitating peer learning networks, among other skills and expertise. You'll be hearing from several of us today and likely seeing others from this team responding in the chat as well. We're also fortunate to be supported by our implementation team. They're a group of coastal flooding practitioners whose insights and extensive expertise in the subject area help really guide and inform the development and direction of this community of practice. It currently consists of these 7 members, although we will be looking to further expand and diversify this group in the near future. So before going further, we want to share a few of the definitions that we have in mind when we're talking about the coastal inundation community of practice, just to make sure we have a shared language and are all on the same page with what those words actually mean. So first, when we use the term community of practice or COP, we're just referring to a group of professionals informally bound to one another through the common pursuit of shared interests. Ideally, it's a way of developing social capital, nurturing new knowledge, and learning from one another. I imagine that many of you already belong to other communities of practice related to aspects of your work, possibly even coastal inundation. That's something that we want to be really mindful of and think about how this new national community of practice can really support and add value to those state, regional, and local networks that already exist in this space. So one of the most frequent questions we receive is about what the term coastal inundation means and what types of sources of flooding are included. For our definition of coastal inundation, we're considering any water on normally dry ground as a result of flooding adjacent to oceans, major estuaries, or the Great Lakes. Coastal inundation can have temporary or permanent impacts and can be caused by processes including, but not limited to, sea level rise, storm surge, wind and waves, precipitation, and or lake level change. So next, we wanted to share the current draft and the draft vision and mission statements of the community of practice. These were developed by members of the leadership and implementation teams. We want to stress, though, that these are very much draft statements that will continue to be shaped and revised as the community of practice evolves. We're sharing these as a starting point for talking today about what we hope this group could be and help achieve. The current big picture overarching vision is that coastal communities and practitioners implement and share knowledge and solutions to advance resilience to flooding now and into the future. And we hope to help achieve that vision through this national network of practitioners that helps facilitate peer-to-peer learning, information exchange, and collaborative engagement on coastal flooding. This community of practice is intended for any and all practitioners addressing coastal flooding in the U.S. states and territories. This is very much a non-exhaustive list, but potential members could include state and local government staff, such as planners, floodplain managers, emergency managers, and resilience and climate officers, as well as researchers, consultants, and boundary spanners who engage with these audiences on coastal flooding. So given the wide range of potential participants in the community of practice, we'd like to spend a few minutes getting a sense of who all is here with us today. We have a few questions for you on the Poll Everywhere platform, which you can access via this link, which will also be appearing in the chat, or you can use the QR code shown here. So I'll give everyone a couple moments to get that open. Yes, it's right in the chat. If you can click directly on that and it should open a window. All right, if we're all set for our first question, we are interested in learning about where you're working geographically. So on this map image, if you have it pulled up on the Poll Everywhere platform, you can click on the map image where in the whichever region your work is focused. Or if you work nationally or internationally, you can click within those boxes. All right, so I see a lot of points already showing up all over the map. It looks like we already have representation from all of the as well as people working nationally and internationally. It seems like there might be particularly many clustered on the East Coast, but we still have some responses coming in. It looks like we have folks joining us today from all across the country and territories, except nobody from Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands as of yet. Okay, looks like those responses are slowing down. So we go on to our second question. This one's going to be a multiple choice one. And we're asking you to please select the sector that you belong to. Or if none of these sectors are a fit for you, you can select other and use the chat to tell us about the sector that you do belong to. Give you a moment to provide your responses. Okay, so it looks like we have people here today from, again, a wide range of sectors. Right now, it looks like local and state government has almost 40% of folks today. Also, the good number from Sea Grant and private industry. All right. So that question will stay open if you're still providing your response, but I'd like to move on to the next slide, please, Brenna. So I'm hoping that those poll questions help give you all kind of a big idea of who all is here today. And we're going to continue getting to know each other, but in greater depth in some smaller breakout groups. So one of our objectives for today and the community of practice in general is to give folks the opportunity to meet and connect with other practitioners working on coastal inundation, potentially in different places or in different ways than you are. Working, what brought you here today, how you enjoy the coast recreationally, or anything else you'd like people to know about you. You have about 8 minutes to chat in your groups. These are going to be unfacilitated breakout rooms. We'll send you a notification when there are about 2 minutes left, but please just try to keep an eye on the clock so that everyone has a chance to speak in your group. When you're in the breakouts, we ask that you please unmute yourselves and turn on your cameras if at all possible. Just as a reminder, only this main room is being recorded today, not the breakout rooms. Also, if anyone is unable or uninterested in participating in a breakout session, you can just stay here in the main room on mute. That's fine also. So with that, you should be sent into a breakout room momentarily, and we'll see you back here at a little bit after 2:30.
Welcome back, everyone. It looks like everyone's still coming back from the breakout groups. So we'll give it just another minute for people to join the main space once again. And just a reminder, if you are with us, please go ahead and mute your microphone so there's no background noise. All right, I think we have everyone back with us. So welcome. I'm Brenna Sweetman. I'm a social scientist with NOAA's Office for Coastal Management, supporting the community of practice. We hope you enjoyed the brief opportunity to get to know a few other folks in the field. As you know, we plan to incorporate additional networking opportunities in our future events to help build connections and community amongst those interested in engaging with this community of practice. In this next section, we're going to dive a little more deeply into understanding participant needs and interests, because as we've discussed earlier in this session, communities of practice are really meant to serve the needs of those who are interested. So we want this to be of greatest value. And so to start, we wanted to share briefly about what we heard in our registration form. So when we asked, what are you most interested in gaining from engaging in a national community of practice focused on coastal flooding? This is a synthesis of what we heard. So networking and collaboration, learning and sharing best practices, successes, lessons learned, and innovative approaches to tackle coastal flooding, peer-to-peer learning and exchanging knowledge and best practices, and of course, staying up to date on the latest tools, science, research models, and funding resources available to help address this issue. So this is just an overview of what we've heard so far. And then in this next section, we'd like to dig a little more deeply and better understand what you're specifically focused on within your field of coastal flooding. And so we'll go ahead and do another poll everywhere question here. And so once again, go ahead and either use your phone to scan that QR code or log on to that web page in an alternate browser. And we'd like to hear from you. How are you working on or affected by coastal flooding issues? And we know that we have a diversity of perspectives in the room with us today, a lot of folks from different backgrounds and areas of expertise. And this is where we would really appreciate to hear from you to get a better sense of who's in the room and what coastal flooding issues you're engaging on. And so we'll move through this fairly quickly, but we'll take a moment here to let those polls come in and see everyone's responses real time. So science to adaptation planning.
Can you put the link in the chat, please?
Sure.
And can you put up the choices again? Because I just got there. Thanks.
Yep. And so this is a fill in the blank. Possibilities are yours here. So we've got some vulnerability mapping, resilience planning. Yep. And long-term resilience, that is a huge element of tackling coastal flooding challenges. Research to engagement, that's a spectrum that we're hoping to work on as well. Sea level rise planning and outreach, more resilient roadways, looking at transportation impacts. Regulatory decision making, modeling coastal floods. And this is absolutely something we're anticipating here. As we know, right, coastal flooding, it spans a variety of different fields and sectors, and really no individual can tackle these challenges alone. And so thinking about this, everyone's different backgrounds here are critical in addressing coastal flooding. This is really great to see, so we can better understand where everyone's coming from and think about what might be of greatest value and how to kind of do some work together collaboratively. Engagement, resilience planning. I'm seeing this arise multiple times here. Yep. Learning and training resources. That's something the Office for Coastal Management and Sea Grant work closely on. Adaptation planning. Research and linking with citizen scientists. Great. This is great to see such a diversity of different interests and topical areas. And yes, we will absolutely share all this information back to the community. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to answer these questions and join us. And really all of what we're doing today is going to be steering our course for the community of practice over the next year and beyond. So this information is incredibly valuable for us moving forward. Okay. Take just another minute here to complete this. And hopefully everyone's had the opportunity to complete the poll. Yep, it might just be a little slow. Yep, we have a lot of participants with us today. Well, great. As long as everyone's recording this poll, we will leave it open for the opportunity to complete it after this session has concluded. But with that, I think let's go ahead and move on to our next poll. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lauren to walk through this next one.
Thank you, Brenna. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in our polls. We do just have one more for you. So in this next portion, we will dig a little bit deeper into learning which topics related to coastal inundation are of greatest interest to you. On your registration forms, many of you highlighted that you wanted to learn about best practices, hear case studies, and learn from other regions related to a specific topic. In response to the variety of interest areas expressed, we wanted to gather your input on which topics this community of practice should focus on during our next virtual convenings. In this next poll, we're asking you to vote on your top interests. The 3 issue areas that rise to the top will be the topics of our upcoming discrete virtual workshops. Each participant will be limited to 2 responses. You can either upvote the suggestions written in by others or write in your own suggestion. We'll keep this poll open for about 2 minutes. We change the page here. And the topics chosen today, these don't limit the community of practice from exploring other areas in the future, but these will help guide us in our next direction for engagement opportunities.
I think we need a new link again. Did you put that in there?
It should be the same link.
When I click on the old link, it goes back to the other question for some reason.
I get the same thing until a new link shared. Yep.
Yeah, me too.
If you refresh the page, the new question shows up.
You refresh it now. It will do it now.
It does seem like it's coming through. So great. I'm seeing lots of answers coming through. Take a time to read your colleagues' responses and upvote on your favorite ones. Looks like coastal development, permitting, zoning, and designs is of interest. Nature-based solutions. Looks like there's a lot of interest in working with underserved communities and how they are addressing coastal inundation. Adaptation planning. Risk communication. Strategies to adopt local and short-term and long-term sea level rise values for a project. It's looking like the voting is slowing down, and there's strong interest going back and forth between nature-based solutions and best practices in working with underserved communities addressing inundation. We thank you all for your input on these areas. It looks like we'll have some clear areas on which would be of most value for our next coming workshops, and our team will work on scheduling these and sending out that information to you. We'll announce those events once finalized with the dates. After this workshop, an evaluation will be sent out before the end of this week to capture any additional interests. Additionally, if you have a success, lesson learned, or innovation related to one of these topics, you can contact us at the end of the presentation. We'll share an email where you can reach out to us. We'll also be able to add that input into the evaluation form. And we'll connect with you to learn more about the topic you'd like to share out related to one of these top 3 here. So I'm already looking forward to diving into these topics more with you and hearing best practices and lessons learned from across the nation. And again, it looks like nature-based solutions, best practices in working with underserved communities that are addressing inundation, and coastal development, permitting, zoning, design, and codes will be the next workshops we'll be working on for you. Up next, we have a panel discussion where 4 panelists will be sharing inundation challenges they're facing in their field and stories of success.
You didn't know if I had the dog, huh?
I'm just going to ask again that you please keep yourselves on mute. So again, we'll have a panel discussion where 4 panelists will be sharing coastal inundation challenges they're facing in their fields, stories of successes, and their perspectives on how this community practice will be of value in addressing them. I'll be handing this baton over to Deborah Butler, the Executive Director of the American Society for Adaptation Professionals, who will be moderating this panel. Deborah, off to you.
Lauren, and welcome everyone to our panel discussion. Very excited to introduce our panelists today who have come to us to have a conversation about coastal inundation and how we can best address the questions that are brought forward through our work. I am the Executive Director of ASAP and very excited to be a part of this exercise and this community of practice. Our speakers today, our panelists today are Linda Aumiller, who is the Associate Director at Rutgers Department of Marine and Coastal Sciences, Gwen Shaughnessy, Coastal Inundation Program Manager and Products Coordinator at NOAA, Priscilla de la Cruz, who is the Director of Sustainability of the City of Providence, Rhode Island, and Doug Marcy, who's the Senior Coastal Hazard Specialist at NOAA Office for Coastal Management. These folks represent the Mid-Atlantic region, coastal areas in South Carolina. Priscilla is in the Northwest, up in Providence, and Lisa is in the, I guess we would call it the Atlantic mid-states in New Jersey. And so we've got 4 different areas of the country. I'm sorry, Shaughnessy Gwen is in California, Oregon, I'm sorry, in Oregon, out in Portland, and we're excited about the work that they all do. So I'd like to first begin by having the panel introduce themselves, 2-minute introduction, and just briefly mention what they find is their biggest challenge in their work and how they would like that expressed through this community of practice. So let's begin with Lisa, please.
Thank you, Deborah. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone. It's amazing to be with all of you. And I'll just echo what Heidi said at the beginning, that it's both overwhelming and a little scary that so many people want to connect on these issues. It means it's so important. I work at Rutgers University. I'm in their Department of Marine and Coastal Sciences. My job is to be one of those boundary spanners that you heard a lot about over the course of the introductions for the community practice. I picture myself as the bridge between science and data and people on the ground who could benefit from understanding that information better to help inform their decision making. Coastal inundation is something that I deal with day to day. It actually is something I deal with even on my commute to work. So knowing how to read a tide chart and understanding inundation becomes part of my daily life, but it also is one of the main concepts we are helping to translate and to do research on in the large Coastlines and People project that I manage for Rutgers. Practice is very important. I think even through the chat today, we're seeing why this is such a necessary group. So many of us that work in this space have challenges or we have successes, and to be able to get together with like-minded folks, or even unlike-minded, but learn from each other is really going to be a benefit to everyone working in this space, whether or not you're on the research collection end or you're on the end of trying to apply the information for making decisions. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you very much. Let's pass it on now to Doug, please.
Hello, afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today. And again, I'm also honored to be part of the panel and excited about this sort of the birth of this community of practice. I am a coastal hazard specialist with NOAA, Office for Coastal Management, which is in the Ocean Service. And I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. Been with NOAA about 23 years now, focused on everything from inland flooding, riverine flooding, where I used to work a lot with the Weather Service, National Weather Service, as well as storm surge with the Hurricane Center over the years. And now, past, I'd say 10 plus years, we've been focusing more on future flooding, future climate change issues with flooding and flood projections, including sea level rise, and working very hard to try to translate the science on climate change and sea level rise to management community so it can be used. Been co-authors on some of the sea level rise technical reports you probably heard about and the national climate assessments, last couple ones. And I lead a group of folks here at our office trying to develop decision support tools and mapping tools to basically visualize the impact of different coastal flooding events, including sea level rise. One of the challenges I see, we've really been trying to work towards getting the information, which is a very technical science information, but into a format that's more user-friendly, including GIS, geographic information systems, and data that can be ingested into tools and for things just like doing a vulnerability assessment, because that's really, we feel like is the first step in building awareness or building the case for, hey, this is something we really need to do. The thing I've enjoyed most is working with local communities. I've worked with Lisa, for instance, in the past when she was part of Jacques Cousteau, translating some of our tools and science to the local governments so they can use them and incorporate their own data. I've worked very closely here in Charleston with our resilience coordinators, folks trying to make the case to their city council that we need to invest a lot of money into this because this is a very vulnerable place that we live in. And I too deal with flooding on the way to work every day. Matter of fact, where I work shuts down sometimes because we get too much water covering the roads. So as we get forward into this discussion, I'm going to be looking for the community of practice, or we will be, and some of the products we're developing through some of the funding we've got through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to vet with this community what the requirements are, how can we make your job easier in translating the science and the information so you can use it to make decisions. So thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Doug. Priscilla?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Priscilla De La Cruz. I go by she, her, hers. I am the Director of Sustainability for the capital city of Rhode Island, Providence. I've been in this role for about 6 months now. My background over the past 15 years has been more focused on the policy side of climate and environment, but also in looking at green energy strategies to help mitigate climate. I grew up in Providence, lifelong resident, so this job is really exciting for me, although very daunting and scary in the age of climate change, of course, which brings the urgency, but really exciting because it combines my lived experience in growing up in what we refer to as an underserved community in the south side of Providence that has been disproportionately impacted by decades of disinvestment from, education to infrastructure, and now disproportionately impacted by climate change. And being able to bring that lived experience along with the policy background into my day-to-day work is really fulfilling. Really briefly, in terms of the Department of Sustainability, it's one of our newer departments for the city of Providence. Stems back to when the role was created under a previous mayoral administration. perhaps about 10 years ago or so. And since then, our department has really focused on creating healthy and low carbon climate resilience strategies that will really improve the quality of life for our residents, especially those that have been disproportionately disinvested in and impacted through systems of oppression. And that's where our climate justice plan comes into play, which is a nationally recognized plan released back in 2019. So I see that as my department's top priority of implementing that plan. So that plan not only puts us on a path towards achieving carbon neutrality by 2050, but it also honors a collaborative governance approach, centering meaningful engagement. So in anything that we do across the board when it comes to climate, whether it is mitigating and reducing our emissions across sectors, or whether it is adapting to a changing climate and looking at resiliency efforts, is centering first and foremost equity and justice. And that's why I wanted to stress in my opening remarks the importance, or allude to the importance of environmental justice and lived experience. So that is something that we're doing day to day. I think our twofold challenge is we are learning how to do this work across departments and citywide. That is a tall, I think, ask, right, when there's many departments and city folks involved. But I have to say, I'm really proud of the work we've done thus far. Our committee members are seeing the impacts of extreme weather events. Alone in 2023, we've had 6 flash flooding events that really exposes the vulnerability of our aging infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure, and sewer infrastructure. So we have the challenge ahead of not only mitigating the impacts of climate like sea level rise, but also ensuring that we can keep our communities safe as we see more of these extreme weather events increasing. So I will stop there. There's more that I would like to say, but I'm sure there'll be an opportunity during the panel discussion.
Thank you very much. Gwen, please.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Gwen Shaughnessy. I'm going to try to keep my remarks short so we can get into some of the discussion and some of the questions. My background has been with NOAA for about 13 years. I'm fairly new in my current role as the Coastal Inundation Program Manager and Products Coordinator at NOAA's Center for Operational Oceanographic Products and Services. That is a mouthful, so we like to shorten that to co-ops. And prior to that, I was really focused a lot on engaging with communities. And something that Priscilla just mentioned really spoke to me is that I've had such a privilege of working with so many communities across the span of my career, and hearing the diversity of lived experience and how different communities just live and enjoy and also experience trauma along the coast with different systems that have come through, whether that's hurricanes in the southeast, nor'easters up north, tsunamis on the west coast. And so it's an immense privilege to experience that and to sit with people in community and listen to those experiences, and then try to translate that up so that from a federal perspective, we can examine what products and services we're delivering to those communities to make a difference on the ground in decision making that happens every day, that saves lives, that saves properties, and really makes a difference. And so I'll just say that right now, in my new position, I started with co-ops probably about 6 months ago. My work has really shifted and is now focused more on the coordination side. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and even the Inflation Reduction Act funding that is, coming through the pipeline right now is historic. It is an incredible opportunity for us to make a difference in the work that we do along the coast. And as you can imagine, part of that, one of the challenges is coordinating all of the work that's happening with this historic investment. And so that's really where my work is focused right now. Is looking across the NOAA offices that are focused on seasonal to annual flood prediction, and really trying to enhance our capabilities around that. And my work really spans across the, research perspective and, how are we improving the science through different modeling and prediction efforts, all the way through to the pipeline of developing and enhancing some of the products and services that meet user needs on the ground and out in the field. And so I'll just leave it there and joining my fellow panelists, and excited to dive into the discussion and some of the questions.
Thank you very much, Gwen. And I have a question for the entire panel. So I'm going to throw this one out there and ask you to think for just a moment and see how your transdisciplinary and multi-functional roles might address this particular question. Many communities on the coast have coastal inundation problems that are caused by upstream or interventions that happen away from communities. So perhaps flooding in the mountains, or the forest fires cause a lack of proper soil drainage. So you have mudslides on the West Coast, or perhaps you have inundation because of the way rivers have been restructured or re-engineered upstream from coastal communities. So from your particular vantage points, how do you see this community of practice engaging municipalities or coastal communities in order to address those challenges? And we look at that through, of course, through an equity lens, through a technology lens, through a communication lens, and through a community engagement lens. So I'm just going to throw that question out there. Have you think about it for about 5 seconds, and then talk to each other about how that might happen. So I'll let you volunteer to see who goes first.
Deborah, I'm happy to start. What I think I heard in your question was the interrelated impacts of all sorts of different climate effects, and then what they do in terms of the downstream impact it has on communities. If I heard that right, I think the way the community of practice can help address that is, I think, each climate impact in and of itself is complicated. And so as a community of practice, we could not only talk about how to message or get across the important points of each one of those impacts, but then also work together to think about what worked and what maybe hasn't worked in others' experiences when you try to start layering some of those concepts on top of each other, and it gets even more complicated. So that could be one way I think the community of practice could work together.
Any other thoughts?
I agree with that. I think what I'd like to add to what Lisa described so well is that when I think about the magnitude of the challenges we're facing because of the climate crisis, from my policy background, just seeing how it really does require all hands on deck. Like, you need practitioners, scientists, community members, government policymakers, just all at the table trying to navigate this. So when I think about community of practice, I think about being able to really tap into a collaboration and sharing those best practices, but also lessons learned. And things are also changing so rapidly, to being able to share that through a community, I think it's really impactful. But also, as Gwen mentioned earlier, it's just a historic time for the amount of federal funding that's coming in. So for us, when we think about maximizing those investments and bringing them into the city and also the state, collaboration is, top of mind to really be able to secure that funding, where you really do need folks with lived experience at the table helping you inform how you're going to assess flooding events, but you also need the engineers at the table as well.
Doug, your hand's up? Oh, we have 2 hands up, so you guys.
Yeah, I'm going to spend a little more time talking about the science that is kind of still evolving in this area, where the connection between riverine or freshwater flooding and coastal has been this sort of holy grail that we've been trying to figure out for a long time. the modeling has always been done separately, kind of in different silos of different parts of the research and government community, and it's now starting to. There's other communities of practice actually that are trying to address this. They call it like coupled modeling, and that is, the riverine community, just like what Weather Service is doing with the National Water Model, and then trying to couple that with what the ocean modeling community is doing with 2D hydrodynamic models for storm surge, and trying to couple those together to get a better understanding of what that sort of compound flooding issue, which is we're right in the middle where most of our coastal communities are getting both, and how they interact is really important. And then there's a whole other issue with urban flooding. Urban flooding is not really even mapped or taken into account, especially like with FEMA mapping. It's that's more on the locals. What is the storm's water system? How is it able to handle the amount of rain, and especially excessive rainfall events we've been seeing, in addition to sea level rising? And so you've got areas where they just can't drain when we have high tides, when we get a lot of water. So it is an area that we, on the research side, is really being looked at. A lot of funding going into it, and then there's there's the whole water quality issue.
Yeah, I would add to that and build on what everybody has been saying, in that there's, I think, a space and an opportunity for us to understand the science better, but then translating that into impacts, I think, is also a really important moment for us as well. And where the community of practice, I see, has a real opportunity. I mean, we've already seen it in the chat. I mean, it's been lighting up. A while back, I can't even track it. There were connections being made potentially to be recorded again.
No, now we're back. I have another question for you. There's a couple of questions in the chat, but I want to ask one more question before I go to the chat, and it's how do we as practitioners, how does the community of practice also embrace knowledge that may be Indigenous knowledge or place-based knowledge, which normally is not included in this conversation? And is there a format through the work that you do where we can approach that knowledge with respect and incorporate it into the work that we do, particularly in areas that have had very long-standing populations who understand the ecologies, we think, better than our more recent populations? Hands up. Anyone?
I can start us off. I referenced earlier our climate justice plan and the collaborative approach that was taken to develop that plan. That was a multi-year process where the City of Providence worked with frontline community members, those most impacted by climate change, and that included members of Indigenous community, low-income community members, communities of color, and really centered their voices as we were developing the climate justice plan. And really with the goal in mind that if we could center their voices, and they were at the table, actively partner with the city to craft these decisions, then we're ensuring that they're not left behind, and that, you know, those strategies are going to be able to benefit everyone in Providence. So that is a model that we continue to work day in and day out to implement. That also goes along with how, as city government, we work to really educate ourselves in how to better engage with the community. So I mentioned that collaborative framework, but till this day, you know, we're still looking at how do we meet the community where they're at? How are we ensuring that we are in tune with what with this type of solutions that they're looking for? So a concrete example of that is we in our last fiscal budget successfully included money for a stormwater and sewer assessment study. As Doug mentioned, Providence, like many other communities, we have aging infrastructure for stormwater and sewer. We're talking infrastructure that's 75 to 100 years old. And when you combine that with the downstream, upstream challenges, everything is just magnified and our drains just cannot handle that. So one of the things that we're doing, onboarding a consultant, and as we onboard that consultant, we're also starting to form an advisory committee where we're going to bring different stakeholders, including environmental justice community members, to really look at what does a sustainable pathway look like to maintaining our stormwater system, but also to ensuring that we are improving it. And it's going to be looking at 10 years from now. What kind of system do we need to have? So again, it's just really centering those voices and meeting those community members where they're at, and also compensating those environmental justice community members for their lived experience. That was something that was done throughout the development of the climate justice plan. And as a result, a community-led effort emerged, and they're still very much engaged, which is the Racial Environmental Justice Committee. And they operate as their own organization, which is community-led, BIPOC-led, and really, working hand in hand collaboratively with us, but also holding us accountable.
Thank you.
I didn't raise my hand, but I can add a couple things. I think one of the things we are really trying to do is make the science information available everywhere, not just places that are lucky enough to have a tide gauge next to them. Tide gauges are there for a reason, for, based on tidal range and things like that, and ports and harbors. But if you don't live near one, you don't necessarily get a forecast or know what the water level is doing and sea level trends. So one of the things we're trying to do is to develop more gridded data sets that give you projections, give you flood frequency, and similar, like we just talked about the rainfall. One of the products that's used a lot for stormwater design is Atlas 14 precipitation information, and NOAA's working on an Atlas 15, which is going to have climate impacts to the IDF curves there. And then we're trying to do something similar on the coast, where it's a gridded flood frequency, water level frequency, so it's this certain water level has this chance or probability of occurring, at least it did in the past, and how that might change. So you can marry up, when you're doing design for stormwater, the future precip with the future water levels based on different sea level scenarios. And that's hopefully on a grid that could be available for any community. And then places where we traditionally don't have really good data, Alaska is a perfect example. We're working more and more with folks in Alaska to try to do at least mapping. We don't have, for instance, our sea level rise viewer there now, but we're working on trying to do that in at least little postage stamp areas where we do have elevation data for these coastal communities. We're going to start to try to provide that, and all these gridded products as well at those locations too. So hopefully that equity will, that will help with those communities.
Thank you, Doug. Gwen?
Yeah, I'll just add, I think I would be remiss if I didn't say something from the federal perspective about historical trust in some of these communities and access to traditional forms of knowledge being very guarded and kept sacred as it is. So I think there's this moment where there's acknowledgement that outside of the scientific community, traditional forms of knowledge and knowing need to be brought into the conversation. But I think there's challenges with that in trying to understand, how do you access that knowledge and information in a respectful and respectful manner, and also not having those interactions be transactional or extractive. And so I think, from a federal perspective, there are definitely challenges in this realm. I think there's acknowledgement, like I said, that there's a place and an importance and an opportunity for us to welcome that. But I think, for me, at least in my experience, there's still a lot of challenges in terms of how that is done respectfully. And so I think that this community of practice, again, we keep coming back to the point of these, and it's learning opportunities. And others that have been successful, just listening to Priscilla and some of the efforts that they've had within the city has lent perspective already to how to engage and hold space for some of these conversations. But I do think that as someone that's representing NOAA on this panel, there are some delicacies that are around this topic, and I think that those still need to be navigated with care, and I don't think they've been resolved yet. And so I don't know if I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I think that is something that should be on the table and for consideration. And hopefully this community of practice will be a space and a forum for us to have those hard conversations and to learn from one another. So I'll leave it at that.
So go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, I will just add 2 quick points to what I think Gwen laid out so perfectly. In my experience working in the academics sector, in the past 10 years, I wouldn't have heard a question like you just asked us, and now we are talking about it. And I just think that alone is such an advance. But I want to underscore Gwen's point that it's really complicated, and making sure that intrinsic knowledge and cultural knowledge is valued just like we value the classic scientific knowledge. I've heard discussions about this twice in the past week, where actually different groups are working on MOUs, memorandums of agreement, or memorandums of understanding, so that that knowledge is given the same sort of weight and honor and is held carefully, as if it's a scientific data set that someone doesn't want to release before it's published, in that same vein. So I think that these conversations, I'm just so glad we're having them, because a few years ago, you would have never heard this kind of conversation. So it's in that alone, there's a lot of challenges for sure. And I think we're starting to make some progress.
I'm glad that you said that, because my next question is, how do we move this ethic of care and respect when we're looking at data gathering and who owns the data, what level the data is collected, who gets to interpret what the data means, and how do we incorporate those kind of considerations in this community of practice going forward? Any thoughts on that from the panel?
Would love to hear from the panel of experts that are doing this work day in and day out. I will just quickly add from my perspective, one of the things that has been really transformative here in Providence and across the state, when the state is looking at developing its climate strategy and looking at the work that we continue to do in Providence with our climate justice plan, is also how you shift capacity and resources. And it really stood out to me when Gwen talked about the access to information, where, earlier I mentioned the Racial Environmental Justice Committee, where, they went through this collaborative process with the city at looking at the science and lived experience. But also what was a beautiful and transformative process was that they later formed as their own organization. So now they have access, right, to information. They're doing their own research in partnership with other academic organizations. So they're not only relying on the Department of Sustainability or the City of Providence and our staff for information. So, and then the same thing with funding and resources, where we have to ask ourselves, are we the right entity or the right person or the right group to lead this, or is our duty and responsibility to really shift that capacity and support those folks on the front line?
Thank you very much. I think we're about at time now. Lauren, are we where we're supposed to be with time, or do we have one more question perhaps from our community of practice?
We have 5 more minutes.
Oh, great. Okay. Let me scroll through the chat quickly and see. I'd like to bring in questions that have come in from our audience here. And let's see. Are there any particular, wait, here's one, just popped up. Aha, we have the managed retreat buyout conversation that always is a part of coastal inundation, whether or not that works in some instances. Where is it fair? Where is it not fair? Where is it equitable? And how do we expand that choice to folks who probably are not homeowners, who live in apartments, or who don't have the opportunity to take advantage of a federal or a regional buyout program? So I'd appreciate any comments from this panel on what they think of perhaps those options as coastal inundation mitigation, perhaps. Any thoughts from the panel? Managed retreat or buyouts?
Well, I would love to hear from Lisa. Sorry, not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. And the reason I'm saying this is because, Lisa, you were so involved, post Sandy in the Mid-Atlantic area, specifically New Jersey. And I'm just curious with your experience, because I know you've been involved with buyout programs and worked alongside communities while they're going through it. And so I think you could really lend perspective to this. Sorry to call you out.
It's okay.
But
No, I'm happy to be called out. I'll try to be quick because I noticed Doug's hand went up too. In some cases, retreat is sort of like a word we don't always talk about. And by we, I might mean the community of practice at large. It's a very difficult topic, as I think you framed the question, Deborah, that it's a very challenging topic. In New Jersey, our Blue Acres program has done tremendous work with looking at buyouts for folks who want to be bought out. And they also do offer rental assistance programs for places where the home landlord chooses to get bought out, and then the individuals living in the home, the renters, are then displaced. There is certainly a perception of inequity around buyouts in New Jersey. A lot of times the money has gone along riverine communities where there's been constant flooding over so long, whereas in the coastal communities, sometimes there's not as much desire because there continues to be federal funding for beach nourishment and other ways to mitigate some of the flooding issues. And then there's always the conversations about the impact on the tax base. Also, the poorer communities whose cost benefit doesn't add up as well as other communities that are less economically well off often feel like they're being targeted first for buyouts, whereas the richer communities are not being asked to consider those options. So it's a very complicated issue, but in New Jersey so far, it has been homeowners' choice. People have not been technically forced out. Doug, I can pass it to you.
Oops. Yeah, sorry. I could, this is a hot topic, right? It's been discussed for years. I mean, if you look at all the buyouts, especially after Sandy, and there's been some really good examples of it. They're all on riverine areas. They're all in lower income areas. The math just doesn't work to do it on the open coast. It does. You're not going to ever, well, we haven't seen it yet. Let's just say where you're buying out like beachfront properties, because it's all based on a cost benefit analysis, and the economic differences there is what drives that. There's a lot of stuff you can read about it. I know Professor Rob Young at Western Carolina has got. He's actually been trying to promote the fact that we really should be trying to buy out those beachfront structures. I mean, they're probably the most vulnerable. So I think when it comes down to is, there's certain incentives, and you can get back to building there in the first place and having subsidized insurance for doing so, even if you're in a hazard area. Yeah, you're going to pay higher premiums, but you still are going to get bailed out, and it's still being subsidized somewhat. A lot of it, they used to pay for the flood insurance program would actually pay to remove structures on the beach when they got in damage, like the Upton-Jones law, but that's not there anymore. So many states like Texas have to basically come and tell people they got to demolish the structure if it gets damaged. There's just a whole lot of issues related to it, but and the retreat issue is something Lisa brought up. I think they're even trying to rename that. We don't like the word retreat in this country. It seems like we're running away from the problem, and so even though we kind of are, so yeah, it's fraught with perils. The political side of it. I think what it comes down to is a lot of what we really need to do is reinvent the cost-benefit equations that the agencies are using, that only focuses on the infrastructure, not the ecological benefits. Things like that are not taken into account, and the fact that looking at you should really look at the repeat. What are the repetitive flooding properties? That's usually what makes them eligible for buyouts. If they're repetitively flooded and claimed, then FEMA will say, okay, it's not worth us anymore. We're going to buy you out. So, but there's got to be a different way to try to monetize or figure that equation out for the areas that are especially vulnerable. They just happen to be valuable property still. That may change with sea level rise. We'll see.
Could I offer some perspective on that? With 25 years of experience handling FEMA buyout programs here in North Carolina.
Can you tell us who you are?
Chris Crew, North Carolina Emergency Management, and for 25 years I've been involved in acquisition programs. A lot of ours have been in riverine areas, and those do tend to occur in lower income and minority communities in a lot of cases. One thing that is a principle of all of these FEMA suite of programs is they are entirely voluntary on the part of both the property owner and the local government as to whereas they want to participate in the project or not. So the reason that we don't see a lot of oceanfront acquisitions are twofold. Most of the coastal counties don't want to remove those properties from their tax base. Recently, the National Park Service paid to purchase either 2 or 3 houses on the Cape Hatteras National Seashore down at Rodanthe that had been eroded to the point that they would no longer be buildable, but the county would not pursue these and demand their demolition. So the Park Service came up with funds to buy them out. So that's one of the impediments to that. Our own state priorities for a good bit of the past have suggested that these acquisition funds are to be allocated to structures that are primary places of residence rather than resort rentals, although under the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program, we have provided funding to acquire resort type rentals on the premise that the state was not paying the matching funds on those. Typically, the matching 25% would come from the property owner, but a couple of recent studies about equity in these acquisition programs indicate that, North Carolina has been fairly successful in addressing a broad range of socioeconomic status in this program. And I'm convinced that the reason it at least appears that way is that we have, for 25 years, picked up the non-federal match on the hazard mitigation grant program. That's the disaster-related mitigation program, and that's enabled people to participate in the program, without having to put up 25% of the cost or give up 25% of their home value. And we have in the past using some HUD funds.
Hey, Chris,
Yep.
I apologize for
Okay.
cutting you off for a moment here, but we have reached the time.
Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing with this group your perspective and your experience. And this is the exact conversation we would love to have you join in the future as we kind of continue to set up these sessions.
All right. Be happy to participate. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to express a huge thank you to our panelists, to Deborah, our fantastic moderator. It's a tremendously valuable experience to learn from you all and hear your diverse perspectives on tackling coastal flooding. This has been a tremendously thought-provoking discussion, and we really appreciate insights from your professional experiences. I am thrilled with the interest we've had in this initial kickoff event. It sounds like there are a lot of opportunities for future dialogue and collaboration. Some of the main themes I heard today were equitable community engagement, ensuring scientific information access, integrating environmental justice principles, valuing cultural resources, building trust, and exploring the topic of managed retreat and community-driven relocation. We really look forward to moving the needle and pushing for actionable change collectively with all of you to address this and have these future conversations. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. We know that some of you are professionals, and we value your time. If you're interested in CEUs for this event, continuing education unit credits, please complete the Zoom poll that just appeared. We've confirmed that you can receive credit with the American Planning Association, Association of State Floodplain Managers, the American Institute of Architects. If you're interested in other professional organizations, we can consider pursuing this in the future. But really, we want this to be a space where everyone can learn and share and grow together. And really, we'll make sure that in the future we have greater opportunities for this. So this is really fantastic that you all are taking the time to join us and share your perspectives, your challenges. Next, we're going to have an evaluation form where people can continue to let us know what's your preferred way to engage moving forward. Is it virtual gatherings? Is it in person? Is it a newsletter? Please let us know. Please take a moment to complete that post kickoff, and we will really take that information to heart moving forward. And so with that, I would just offer again a thank you to everyone for joining us today, our speakers, our participants. It has been a delight to share with you all, and we look forward to continuing to engage with you in the future. Thank you very much.